Welcome to another episode of Out of the Blank Podcast. I'm here with Stefani.
Hello, Robbie.
Stefani, if I had to ask, what do you prefer to talk about, or what are you curious about, maybe?
Oh, goodness. What am I curious about? Well,
Life?
life, the, the chaos that is our country, Scientology, which
Mhm.
is, I'm a little bit more knowledgeable about Scientology than I am the chaos in our country. Whatever,
With
I just really
Scientology,
appreciate, I'm
um,
sorry.
with Scientology, for instance, what got your interest of it? Why are you fascinated with Scientology?
Well, I hadn't really, I knew it was out there, just like there are other cults. But I never really paid any attention to them. I always assumed that they were just these um, strange or quirky, whatever sects. But then after Leah Remini left the the cult and started speaking out, I started paying a little more attention. And then she had the multi-award-winning docuseries on A&E, Scientology in the Aftermath, with Mike Grinder, who was a former very high-ranking OSA member. And the guests that they had were just exhibiting such pain from their experiences. And I started getting more interested in what kind of a religion would cause people to be so damaged. And the more I looked, the more I became aware that these aren't just quirky, benign organizations. They're dangerous, abusive groups. And I'm a little bit familiar with like the FLDS, the Kingston group, but not as much as I am with Scientology. But it just feels to me like Scientology is on the top as far as their abuses, because they're just so insidious, with even starting with children. The psychological terrorism that they raise their born in members. And I just felt like I needed to speak out. So that's when I started doing my blog, and I started my Twitter account, and been going from there.
It's very upsetting to me. I don't know. It's just because if I'm like an empathetic person I don't really care what people want to do as long as they're not hurting anybody else. But the hardest thing for me is standing side and watching something that's going on where people are literally destroying other people, or trying to control another person's life, which is a lot what's going on with our country right now. And I mean, it seems like
Yeah.
the world is being very divisive. Religion, I'm not religious at all, but the one thing I see that's good about it is the aspect of belief, because thinking that there's just nothing is horrible. But the way that it gets turned into what it is today, where it's, if it doesn't fit your narrative, then I need you to leave. Or if it doesn't fit your narrative, then it needs to I need to twist you into my narrative. And I've never been a fan of that. The excommunication that Scientology does with family members, even a couple friends of mine who are ex Jehovah's Witnesses talk about how they can't talk to their family members. What type of God would want that out of anything? What
No,
that's
there
not a
is no,
human aspect.
no, it's not. And for me, I'm a Roman Catholic, and I am extremely aware of the scandals and the abuses that are going on in my church right now, especially among my leadership. And I am appalled. And I also am addressing those on my own. Um, I feel like the people are supposed to be standing for something, standing for goodness. And if they're standing for anything but that, for the family and for goodness and for compassion for each other, um, that's not God. That's just not, that doesn't come from God. And one of my biggest problems with Scientology is they hide behind the First Amendment, insisting that they're a religion. And yet, in spite of the fact that they tell people that they are all inclusive and interdenominational and everybody is included, and you can be a Catholic or a Christian and a Scientologist, you cannot. Once you're in, and it's even in a document, a government document, the IRS form that Scientology filled out to get their tax exemption, where they say under oath that Scientology technology has to be practiced exclusively. So any religion that damages and destroys family, is emotionally, physically, financially, spiritually abusive, like I said, the destroying a family, disconnection is one of the most insidious, horrible things that I can think of. Tearing brother against sister, spouses against each other. If you leave, the spouses are told they have to divorce each other. There is a form of excommunication in the Catholic Church. And I bring that up because Scientology is very quick to point fingers and say, well, look, they do it and we do it too. It's an accepted thing. However, there is no place where the Catholic Church says, if you are at that point where you have excommunicated yourself from the church, that you can't see your family. And there is also no point, even if you find yourself excommunicated, and believe me, that takes a long time and it takes a really serious things. It's not like just speaking out against the church, like you can find yourself in Scientology. In the Catholic Church, if you get to that point, you're also not banned from walking through those doors. You're encouraged to come in. You're encouraged to, try to find your way back, but nobody comes to your house. Nobody hires private detectives to stalk you. Nobody follows you and takes photographs of your children or steals your trash. It is completely your free will to do. If you want to be a part of the church, you can. If you don't, that's between you and God. There's no abuse like Scientology does.
I I had a recent episode with Sean Hayes, who we talked about Scientology. I don't know if you checked out his episode, but
I did a little bit, yeah.
I tagged Scientology in my story as a joke because I always like picking on these. I'm not against it. I just look at it like I don't like people that have all this power. To me, that just seems like that's corrupt. That's corrupting. So I like to poke the bear. And now
Mm-hmm.
every single story I've posted since this episode, and it's been a while, they just look they're stalking me, and I'm like, okay. I mean, and it's got the verified blue check mark. There's
Yeah,
Scientology TV,
yeah,
Scientology. I'm like, oh my God, you have like 50,000 Scientology accounts. And I'm starting to realize that now that I'm kind of diving into this community a little bit, you're starting to see glimpses of how popular of a thing this is in this world. But it seems like the way that the world really hasn't, like, I really never cared about Scientology before I learned about it. And then I started looking and seeing how dark it kind of goes in a way. Everyone knows that it's out there, but nobody's like, oh, it's not that big of a thing. And then you realize, no, it's huge and it's just very, very enclosed off. And if you don't know about it, then you're probably not going to find out about it unless you come in contact with someone who has left that. And even then, it's like you'll be monitored because people that left that are, how do you know if you're truly out? You writing a blog, for instance, about this. Do you think that they're following you? They have to be watching you.
absolutely. Yeah, absolutely. I think I'm fortunate because I came into this activism, this exposing Scientology. I came into it at, I feel like, the perfect time. Once Leah and Mike did their show, um, Scientology does have written, in spite of what they say, they do have written policies, a fair game, dead agent, just attacking, and um, the ultimate goal for these things is to intimidate and to silence. And given everything that just Mike and Leah, but and so many others, Aaron Smith Levin, the Headleys, all of these other former members who have spoken out, they have all suffered terribly at the hands of Scientology in revenge. And that's really what the doctrine of Scientology is. They are a hate revenge group. And I'm not surprised that you've caught their notice. Um, I have. I know that they're following me. There is one group, there's one, not group, there's one Scientologist. It's actually Mike Rinder's daughter. Her name is Taryn Teutsch, and she's still in Scientology. And she has a campaign that she and her mother and OSA, which is the Office of Special Affairs for Scientology, have launched against him since 2010, where they're accusing him of the most vicious and violent domestic violence. And it's all designed to discredit him and to ruin his character. The fact of the matter is, their narrative is a complete lie. Mike never did the things that they are accusing him of. I know because I, independently of all of the information about it that there is out on the web, I had filed a Freedom of Information Act with the Pinellas County Sheriff's Department and got the paperwork on what happened that day. And Mike was sitting in the parking lot of a doctor's office, minding his business and speaking on the phone, when a group of 9 or 10 people just descended on him. They were Scientologists, and Scientology hired private detectives who had searched and hunted him down, and they started attacking him. His brother Andrew, who had flown all the way from Australia for this little party, tried to get the car keys away from Mike, and they tried to keep him in his car. They were screaming and swearing at him. And if it had to happen, what was nice about it was the person that Mike Grinder happened to have been on the phone with was the BBC reporter, John Sweeney. And Sweeney was recording his conversation with Mike. So this whole incident got recorded. And yet with that unequivocal proof as to what happened that day, Taryn Teutsch and Kathy Bernardini, which is Mike's former wife and who was injured that day by herself, she injured herself. They keep saying that Mike is a wife beater, that he damaged her for life, that he broke her shoulder, that there was blood spurting on the walls. I mean, everything that is so easy to fact check. And I did. And that's really where I started with my blog was, hey, I'm going to defend him. No man, it doesn't matter whether it's Catholic, Scientology, or the man in the moon, no man deserves to be falsely accused of something like this, whether it's rape, domestic violence, it's wrong. And when I saw this, I was furious that they would go this low to try to destroy someone. So I've been in a back and forth fight of words with the Taryn Teutsch account. And I know that they at least are watching what I write about that, because she has, in her own blog, she has addressed some things in a roundabout way that I have said. So I'm very aware. And I know that they know me also because I went down to Clearwater in March for an event. And Scientology has a information center there in Clearwater. And their big thing is all are welcome. So before my event, the event that I was going to attend, not be a part of, just as a guest, but the event, before it started, I had a couple of hours to kill. And I thought, okay, so I'm going to go into the information center because all are welcome. And I walked in and there was a guest book there. And they said, can you sign the guest book? And I'm not going to lie about anything. So I signed my name. Well, Amber Scalgia, I don't know how to pronounce her last name, but anyway, the minute she saw my name, she got up and went through a door and then came back a minute later with another woman. And I was invited to leave. They tossed me out. She said, are you here for the event? And I said, yes, I am. And she said, well, you're gonna have to leave. And I said, why? I'm just standing here. And she said, you need to leave. So I said, but what about all are welcome? And they said, you need to leave. So at that point I was like, okay, thank you very much. Have a nice afternoon. And I walked out. So much for all are welcome. But they knew who I was. As soon as they saw my name, I was disinvited from their welcome center. And
Okay.
after that, I was going to say, after that, when I was sitting on the outside a pizza place on the same street, and I was eating a piece of pizza. I was by myself, and I looked across the street, and there was a man who was video recording me. He had his phone on a tripod and a laptop sitting there, and he was not making much. He wasn't trying to be subtle about it. He would look over at me and then he would adjust his phone so that it was at me. And he was recording everything I was doing. So I had the full Scientology experience when I went down there. So they know who I am.
Um, First off, I have a couple of questions. One, what type of pizza were you eating?
I just had I had a delicious slice of cheese pizza, and it was great.
Respect, classic. I like it.
That's
Two,
right. I'm a classic.
with the idea of like Scientology, for instance, now I'm a very, very small fish, not even a fish. I'm more of a minnow in the eyes of Scientology. Do you think they're actually watching anything? Like if they've seen my stories like for the past week and a half or so, do you think that I'm on their radar at all? And if so, why haven't I've reached out for them to do the show? Mostly because I like perspectives. I want to see what they got to offer perspective wise. I don't necessarily agree, but I have to hear both. Like if I follow cult people, I got to follow ex-cult people, so I get the whole ends of the
Right.
spectrum. But is that even possible that I could even get an ounce of a second of their time either?
I doubt it. Um, Scientology has policies on how to handle uh, the press, reporters, journalists, and I guess in this new day and age, bloggers and podcasters and things like that would probably fall under those same policies. And um, anyone that that would promote anything anti-Scientology, whether you try then to get their side of it or not, I don't think you're automatically
I'm on a watch list.
yeah, and I don't know. I mean, there's some of the questions probably former members could answer better than I am because I'm not a former member of the cult. But I think that it's just they were more than likely they are keeping an eye on the things that you say. Now, whether or not at this point they're going to do anything about it, I doubt it. I mean, like I said, beyond what happened to me in Clearwater, because I was right in their midst, they've never done anything, never written anything to me, never come to my home or stalked me or anything like that. I know that they are aware of what I'm doing, but I have not experienced any real fair game or anything like what Leah Remini experiences. Um,
Well, it's a
for
defamation
example,
of character. That's the main thing that they go for, which is almost
yeah,
it's besides physical abuse aside with Mike, a defamation of character, making you seem crazy in the eyes of the public or making everything you say seem like a lie where no one was going to believe you that you're just a little boy who cried wolf. That is one of the worst things possible to do. I mean, they did that with Bob Lazar and his whole
mm-hmm,
entire career when it comes to the whole aliens and releasing all
yes,
that information too, Area
yeah,
51, which we
yeah,
ended up finding out was real. This is a manipulation tactic of people that want to have control, but necessarily don't have the stance, or they have people for sure, but they don't have power like the government has power. And that's what they like. You can sense about people that have this, and power is so corrupting, but they have a very, very weird sense of obtaining it by attacking people that have a weak, not weak minded, but weak angle or perspective on life, because a lot of the people that join a cult, especially if they join later in their life, is possibly on the factor of they are looking for a place to go. They need something in their life, something to believe in, because right now in their life they can't believe in anything and it just seems like it's way too dark. So that's seen as their light. Other things, such as if you're born into it, you don't know any better. A lot of my friends who have left cults, they're older than me, but they are like childs or children in a way, because they're like, I don't know. I have some person helping us out, get me a job and help me pay rent and stuff. But like for 30 years, everything went to the church and now I have no place to go and I can't talk to my family. You have no help. It's like you just skipped 30 years into being an adult and going out into the world and being on your own, which to me is horrible because
mm-hmm,
you missed out on a bunch of life experience, which I guess at the time you didn't know about because you had never experienced it before. But it's like, imagine if you're in a dome, then after 30 years, they say, well, there's more than just the dome. And they lift up the dome and you're like, what the heck? Like I was just praying on that rock over there. And next
yeah,
thing I know, I'm coming out into this world where we have plasma screen TVs and all these
yeah,
things. And you're telling me that I don't have to just make $5 a week. I can make 50 or
mm-hmm,
250. And it's like, yeah, that's called a job, man. Well, so I get to keep it. It doesn't go into the church. Well, you got to pay bills, but you get a large sum of it back. It's like, oh my God, this is awesome.
yeah. Well, and it's part of the cult. Any cult is to keep their members as I don't want to say use the word uneducated, because that doesn't sound right, but they limit the education that their children and their people get, um, so that they are more reliant on the cult, whatever one that they're in. Um, I think too that, with Scientology, they actually have been used to having power. I mean, look at what they did to get their tax exemption. They were denied. The Supreme Court denied it, and yet they have it. And whatever happened, I mean, Scientology launched a horrible campaign against the IRS, against the individual people that work for the IRS. They filed hundreds of personal suits against them. They used the courts as, as a weapon against people that they want to control. And by the time they got finished, basically, with their campaign against the IRS and the people that were working there, Miscavige showed up one day without an appointment, asked to speak to the head of, at the time, of the IRS, and he was granted a meeting. Whatever went on in that closed door meeting, Miscavige walked out with the exemption. And from what I have heard and what I've read, part of the thing was he was asked, will you stop all of this? Will you stop all the suits? Will you stop this, that, and the other thing? And Miscavige said, yeah, it'll all go away. And that's what happened. That's a lot of power. Now, I think in the last in the last decade or so, that kind of control and fear that they instill in people is starting to fall off, thankfully, because they've been so good for so many years at silencing their critics and what they call their enemies, keeping people quiet through fear and intimidation. And that's starting to be harder for them to do, which I'm very happy about. But they are more than willing to go to the lowest of the low to try to intimidate people. And the psychological terrorism that they employ, I don't understand how our government can consider them a charitable organization and allow them to have this exemption. I mean, yeah, well, exactly.
Money.
That's it,
Where do they get it from? I don't know.
Well, that's a question that's being raised. Ben Schneider's a journalist in Australia, just did a series of pieces for a page. I think it's called The Age, but I don't remember off the top of my head. But anyway, now you want to see a campaign of fair game and dead agent, go to their website called Stan League and read all of their articles about him. The Australian government is starting to ask questions as to how Scientology, with a dwindling membership, can be moving such vast quantities of money from around the world into Australia. And people are questioning, where is this money coming from? And further, now they're also being questioned as to their tax exemption, because they're not a charitable organization. They're just not. And so the question is, so what are you doing that gives you the right to call yourself a charitable organization? What is your charitable acts? I have numerous articles on my blog where I have actually seen their press releases and then gone to the organizations or the people, the businesses or whatever that they say that they're volunteer ministers were working in a charitable situation with. And I know, air quotes. I've gone and I've contacted these people, the businesses and whatever, and said, look, I've seen this press release. Here it is. You can see it in its entirety. I'm trying to fact check this. And I cannot tell you how many times I've gotten emails or letters back saying, we had no idea that this was going on, and we are requesting they remove our photograph from their paper, from their press release. We have nothing to do with Scientology. This never happened. So as far as them claiming all of this charitable work by their volunteer ministers, they may be doing some things, but the amount of things they're doing, at least from what I've checked, they're lying.
Either that or they're slowly sinking and they're just not letting anybody know about it.
Well, that is happening. I mean, membership is dwindling. They want to say they're the fastest growing religion of modern times, and they claim, it was millions of members, and it was hundreds of thousands of members, and no matter where you look, they've got a different number of members, and it kind of fluctuates. Even they can't get it right.
Do you I think it might have been easier back in the day. It seemed like for instance, like Tom Cruise, John Travolta, I know recently left, but he didn't leave?
John Travolta is not going to. He has not left
I
Scientology.
just saw
Tom
a
Cruise will
magazine that said
never.
after 40 years, John Travolta left.
I'll believe it when Mr. Travolta actually says it himself. He's not going to leave.
I didn't even know he was
Whatever.
in until I saw that article. I was like, wait, he was in it?
Kelly, his wife, and he were both Scientologists, and my understanding is that Kelly was perhaps more dedicated even than he was. Sadly, she passed away from breast cancer, and some of us wonder if that death was necessary, because Scientology believes that you pull in bad things that happen, that that they're your fault. You caused them because of some crimes that you committed or in your past lives or whatever. And they
What?
also believe. Oh, you didn't know that?
I know they drop dinosaur eggs in volcanoes or something like that.
No,
They don't
no,
do
no,
that?
no.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, no, there was the intergalactic warlord Xenu had gathered up millions of his various people from planets and flew them in airplanes to various volcanoes, where they had a bomb drop, nuclear bombs, I believe, dropped on them, and then their spirits, their thetans, then latch on to meat bodies.
Makes more.
And
That was foolproof, right? Foolproof. Okay.
but no, John Travolta has not left, as far as I know. He's not left Scientology, and I highly doubt that he will.
Coming from a
Neither will
power
Tom Cruise.
coming from a power standpoint, I look at it like this. Your safest bet is to move all your members to Australia because then it's easier for you. But Australia is an immigrant, is a not immigrant, criminal. It started over criminals.
It
So
started as a penal colony, yeah.
so I look at that like, and I love Australians. They're real. I like the word that sometimes they say words from like, you can't say that here. They're like, we don't care. I'm like, I like that. I don't like being restricted on anything. But when I look at like, that would be their best pace to grow, but they wouldn't take any of that crap that they do. A lot of the stuff, it kind of works better here. America's like the best placed only on a concept of there's a lot more stuff than other countries have. There's a little bit of like everything all at once. But when it comes to back in the day having more power, there are so many actors that are apparently in Scientology that you look at and it's like, how are you successful? I think that's how they got successful is the Scientology is like, if you join Scientology, we'll give you anything you want. And the next thing you know, they're a Tom Cruise like character and they're passing all these things. And I'm like, are you afraid to leave? Because everything nowadays is the optics of how it looks. I look at Scientology like a religion that might be around, but it's not going to keep growing. It's going to kind of shrink in a way, not only on members leaving and the amount of information we got through social media, but woke culture or this new age culture that's coming through. Just because hey, he's in Scientology, I want him in this movie. They go, okay, but he said something in 5 years ago that it's not going to translate. It's going to make my movie go in the crapper. So your Scientology thing has no power here. And it's like Anakin with the high ground or Obi-Wan with the high ground. You lost the battle because now even the people that are in Scientology that you can normally snap your fingers and get them into a next blockbuster film or get them a next blockbuster song or get them into any position in any position that you wanted them in, they look back at they go, yeah, but he said this in the past, and that's not going to translate with today's society. They'll roast him real quick, and then they'll dig into Scientology, and you don't want that, and they back off. Like, I can't have people digging into Scientology, because when you really start looking, if you can get past all the horrid and the crazy experiences of people leaving, the heart, like my heart goes out to those people, because that's really got to suck, especially someone taking advantage over something you need, just like the People's Temple with the Bebop Comet, where they all kind of put bags on their heads and shit. You got to be at a position where you're looking for anything or just a family to connect with. And there are people that join Scientology and they'll excommunicate their family because they have family that believe in what they believe in, not their blood. That doesn't mean anything anymore. And that's how they twist it. Family's more than blood.
Oh.
Your blood
Well,
family is important, but
there's 2 points here that I wanted to try to address. First of all, um, I would proffer to you that Tom Cruise, as a fanatical um, Scientologist, known as David Miscavige's BFF, um, Tom Cruise, there was a video that was leaked where any other normal person, if they had been seen spouting things like that, yeah, you would have thought, oh, wait a minute, this
the
is
COVID
not
mask thing.
normal. No, it was before that. There's a video on YouTube that was leaked where he's sitting there and he looks unhinged to me because he's grinning and laughing and it's very inappropriate. But he says that Scientology is the only group that has the answers. And he says, for example, if a Scientologist is driving past an accident, a car accident or whatever, they know they have to stop because they are the only people that can help. Now, with him,
Wait,
that's what he
what?
said, verbatim. That is a verbatim. He said, Scientologists, if they see an accident, they have to stop because they know that they are the only people that can help. Now, that kind of craziness by anyone else would get the reaction, I think, that you're saying, where people would say, yeah, but he just said, so I don't think he should be in our movie because that's crazy. But not him. You see what he is. I mean, he is a fanatic and he believes all of this crap. And he said that Scientologists can create their own realities in that video.
Oh my
He,
God,
he,
that's why in Talladega Nights he said, Tom Cruise, use your magical witchcraft powers to get the fire off my back. That makes so much more sense now.
yeah, yeah. That video alone, if you took everything else away, if you took the couch jumping on Oprah
Oprah.
Winfrey off, and if you take the screaming, the disgusting screaming rant that he did about the masks, and I don't agree with anybody that was supporting him on that. That is a power trip. That is not the way you treat your employees. I don't care. Um, that's him. That's the angry Scientologist, and that he was mirroring David Miscavige, who the stories of his viciousness and his physical attacks and his verbal attacks on his underlings are just outrageous. And being so close to Miscavige, there's no doubt in my mind that Cruz is modeling that behavior. But for whatever reason, he is where he is in spite of that insane video. And it's the same. Kirstie Alley is also a Scientologist, and she took to Twitter near the beginning of this pandemic and told her followers that if we all got together and they use the word postulated, if we postulated hard enough, which is, wished hard enough, we could probably make the coronavirus go away rather than feed it energy. Okay.
Why does she sound familiar?
Kirstie Alley. She was, well, she's kind of has been, I mean, she she's not really working much now,
There's
but
only
she's
three. There's
still,
only three women in my life that I focus on. That's Leah Remini, Mariah Carey, and then right now I'm on a break with Jennifer Aniston. She's became a little bit too much for me.
yeah, she's a little, but well, Leah Remini, I mean, if anybody has suffered recent, now I'm not talking Paulette Cooper, she definitely has the lock on Scientology, trying to destroy someone. But Leah Remini, in 2019, in January 2019, I believe it was 2019, there was a stabbing at the Australian org, the AOSH org in Sydney, where a young man had been arguing with his mother. She was going to be doing the purification rundown, which is often the first step into, I believe, joining the Sea Org. And he was frantic. He's a minor, and from another country, and here he is in Australia, and his mother is about, for all intents and purposes, he could see she was going to leave him or abandon him for this cult. And they had argued the night before. So then the next morning, when she went to get her to start the purification, he was there trying to, I guess, convince her not to do this. And two Sea Org members, or two assigned, Sea Org members, I believe, came out and began to escort him off the property away from his mother. And I guess that was all he could take, and he broke, and he pulled out a knife and he stabbed them both. And one, unfortunately and tragically, was killed. That was not the proper response. There is never a justification for that. However, I'm just telling you what the circumstances were around that situation. When it hit the news, Scientology blamed Leah Remini for the murder. They said that she was complicit in that murder. She wasn't even in Australia. She had nothing to do with that young man. She didn't know him. She wasn't there. I mean,
Does
they,
nobody question that at all? Like, why?
we all, I mean, the people that have sense and morals all immediately, confronted that. And I mean, the journalist that broke the story, Brian Seymour, from Australia, I believe it's 7 News, he even made a statement that he had contacted the investigators, and they said neither Leah Remini nor Mike Grinder had anything to do with that murder. But Scientology just continued, even after that post, even after that tweet, they continue to claim that Leah is responsible for that. She's responsible for, I think now we're up to over 600 hate crimes are all laid at her door. The arsons that took place at the Jewish synagogues that, around the country, they're saying that that's because of Leah. So that's how this church that calls themselves the most ethical religion on the planet, that's how they respond to people that they consider to be enemies, which I don't think any true religion would label people enemies like that in the first place.
You understand you're doing something very important, right? By highlighting a lot of this stuff in your blog. Like this is something a lot
Well,
of people don't know about. I don't know about. I mean, I'm in a realm of worlds, obviously, with the amount of people I've talked to, but it's so hard to be able to get a message out there because a lot of people, like myself, were clueless before they learned this information. A lot of the people, you know, not saying they walk around with their head in the sand, just it's
mm-mm.
very, very hard to look out of your own view of things, your own problems with things. Life is very, very difficult right now, which is the reason why I think it's gotten away from a lot of people for so long. And this has conceded to happen over and over and over again is because the problems that we face. COVID, nobody cared about aliens. You know, that was the biggest thing, not even a year and a half ago when they tried to storm Area 51. You know, this
I
is
think, if I could just say, I think that the big problem with Scientology, and this is something that I've learned since I started this, Scientology has been, they're extremely adept at hiding behind a false front of benign humanitarianism, and we're just this misunderstood new religion. And if you stop and think about anything that you have ever heard said against the church, what is the church, well, I say church loosely, um, anything against the cult of Scientology, what is the response you always hear? Scientology adamantly denies adamantly denies, adamantly denies. To hear Scientology tell it, that cult has never done a wrong thing in its entire history. They are the most lily white and pure and sinless group on this planet. And when that doesn't work, there's also the Xenu thing, which I honestly think is just part of, if you can get people laughing, it deflects from what's really going on. Oh, they're that crazy alien cult. Don't, whatever. No, they are abusive. They teach
They
their
got me.
members, they teach their members that anything bad that happens is your fault. You pulled it in. If you get cancer, it's because you have crimes, either in this life or a past life. If you're a child that has been molested, then shame on you because you pulled this in.
Oh,
You
dude.
molested you
I
molested
fucking
someone else in a past life. If you're, these right now, this case against the accuser, I mean against Danny Masterson for rape, and everyone says, well, why didn't they go sooner? Why didn't they say something sooner?
why is it
They
still going on?
couldn't. They couldn't say something because they are in a group that says you bear the shame. And if you really believe, first of all, that your very salvation rests on keeping your mouth shut, and also on the fact that you bear the responsibility for these things that have happened to you, why would you run and shame yourself further by saying something? The women that have to live with these crimes are re-victimized by Scientology's teachings. They're not a benign humanitarian organization. They are abusive. And I think the biggest problem that I've run up against is people hear, oh, she's an activist, she's against Scientology. Oh my gosh, that's crazy. They don't understand just how serious and dangerous this group is. And I am trying to get this information out. And it is so frustrating not to be taken seriously. I write dozens of letters to people. I write to other countries. I'm ignored more than I'm responded to. I've even written to the Vatican concerning Catholic organizations that have partnered with Scientology groups. And I've gotten no responses, because there's this now, especially there's this idea of, oh, but inclusion and tolerance, and oh, that they're religions, so they have the First Amendment right. No, actually they don't. We need to rethink what a religion is, first of all. Religions don't destroy families. They don't accuse people of crimes when they know full well that they're lying. I mean, it wasn't that long ago, just at the end of last year, a ordained minister, Edward Parkin, who is, or at least was, the international director of Stand League, posted on Twitter that a certain coffee company was choosing to not show up at the Emmys because they were taking a stand against Leah Remini and Mike Rinder and bigotry and hate. Well, that was a lie. He made that up. We contacted that coffee company and they reached out to Leah and were like, no, we never did that. The decision not to be a part of the Emmys was because of the COVID, because of the pandemic and social distancing. We wish you well. They sent her a gift basket full of coffee and a beautiful card, and he knew he was lying. He knew he was lying. He had to have known he was lying. He made it up. It never happened. But this is how they work. They're dangerous and they're willing to do anything to hurt people. And that's why I just try so hard to get the information out there. But I feel it's so frustrating because so often, like I said, you hear, oh, but that's the Xeno people. Don't worry about them. Do worry about them because they're hurting people and they're abusing people. And I just wish we could stop them.
Yeah, it see, because exactly when you said the Xenu thing, I started laughing, and now I see the whole point of that is the idea is make it sound so ridiculous people laugh and don't take it seriously when you slowly work in the backgrounds of everything, and you're really just this. It's a very that's very strategic, and I think that's with a lot of things that people really don't understand until you start hearing more and more about it. I mean, we all know about Scientology. You can ask anybody on the street what's Scientology, they'll tell you it's those things. But
Hmm.
when you really look into it, do you really know what Scientology is? And you start finding, like yourself, you've been digging and you've been writing about this stuff, and you start to see the horrors and the manipulational tactics. I am not a fan of physical abuse, obviously, but what's even worse than that is emotional and mental abuse, because that's something you can't heal from. That is
Mm-mm.
something that is the longest and hardest road. And I took psychology in school,
Hmm.
went for chemical dependency originally, and just trying to maneuver how the mind works, a slight thing that goes wrong can mess up a person for life. And now you're literally you're crutching these people. These people are
Right.
now being put in a position where they don't have a choice in what goes on. They don't have a choice in anything like that. They go, well, they have free will. They can leave whenever they want. It's not that simple.
No,
It's
it's not.
You're going to be followed to the ends of the earth, like that person that you talked about that was
Hmm.
videotaping you and
Right.
being not even hiding it, just out in
No.
the open.
Yeah, he was sitting right across the street in full view and being very overt with his actions. Um, I just, I thought it, I just was like, whatever, you know, I wasn't afraid of him
I would have
because,
bought him a slice.
you know, hey, I'm not wasting my money on a Scientologist. They got millions of tax-free
That
dollars.
goes
He
on
could
a
buy
shirt.
his own pizza.
That goes on a
And,
shirt.
you know, that's right. He could buy his own pizza.
Mhm.
But I just wish that I wish that we could get to a point where we could help the people that are trapped inside these cults, whether it's the FLDS, whether it's the Kingston group. You know, I don't understand why Warren Jeffs is sitting in prison when David Miscavige is not. Now, yes, Warren Jeffs was molesting little girls, and he is exactly where he deserves to be. Don't get me wrong. However, people are saying, you know, when I write to the IRS, I write to the US Treasury, you know, well, they're a charitable group and they have the right to practice their religion. Well, so did Warren Jeffs, and he said that his religious belief is to marry 13-year-old little girls. Where do we draw the line? David Miscavige has got people that we haven't seen for years. Where's his wife? His wife hasn't been seen or heard from since 2007.
I know
Where
Leah
is she?
Remini was trying to figure out what
Yeah.
happened to her.
I mean, now in fairness, it's it's accepted she's probably up in Lake near in the Lake Arrowhead area working on one of their top secret uh, bases or whatever you want to call it.
They got
Um,
bases.
oh yeah, the one CST is where is they're like uber silent, be quiet, top secret place where they are transcribing all of L. Ron Hubbard's words, lectures, writings onto gold discs and storing them for posterity in
Wait,
argon gas filled
I saw
vaults.
I saw a meme. It was like inside Church of Scientology. First of all, it looks like a Disney building. I'm guessing that's the joke they're trying to make as well to distract you from the point. But when you go inside, there's like all these like pictures plastered on a wall of L. Ron Hubbard's face all over the place, and there's like a ball pit, and there's just this weird. It looks like a music. It looks like a Pee-wee's Playhouse type scenario. Is that all a joke to distract you to not take it seriously?
I'm not sure because I haven't seen it, but what it sounds like it could possibly be the flag building in Clearwater. Um, they have a superpower building. Once you
It's
start
purple.
along there, yeah, once you start on their bridge to what I call bridge to nowhere, um, and move up their OT levels, there comes a point where supposedly you will gain superpowers. And in this multi-million dollar facility, you can hone these superpowers. There's a smell wall, and it's I don't know a whole lot about it, but I know that, and I think there's one of those gyroscopes you see that like NASA astronauts use to, and that's there, that's supposed to help you with your superpowers and all of this. That may be what that is a reference to, is the superpower building in Clearwater.
Um,
It's getting crazier and crazier, isn't it?
yeah, it's really hard not to laugh when you realize how the severity of how bad this thing comes. I think you almost got me to almost tear up a little bit when you talked about the kid that molested and said he deserved it because he was molested in a past life. That's a horrible thing to put in somebody's head, that they deserve something like that they don't deserve a shot in life just because on the past actions or whatever the weight of the world or whatever the experiences they had have combined to release this event now. That is a nut. That's like a democracy that acts like that has a disguise of a democracy, but really is a totalitarian government. And that's what's insane, is like people don't realize it. They think it's never going to lead that far. It always leads that far. It's when you see the direction of it going, the goalpost never just stops. Nobody says, I have enough power. No, they want to keep it going, because if you can make millions of people listen to you, if you can make millions of people work under your whim, that's what they want. They don't want to stop at 10 people. They don't want to stop at 5. They want to consume everything.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. It was interesting to me that you had said that you had studied addiction. Um, Scientology has a front group called Narcanon. It's their drug treatment program, and they have facilities around the country. Um, it's just another entrance. It's a preying on the vulnerable, and it is a stepping stone into recruitment, getting people while they're at their lowest points. I know that out in Oklahoma, there have been several deaths that have been investigated at Narcanon, not to be confused with Narcotics Anonymous, two entirely different groups. One is legitimate, one is Scientology. Narcanon will use former patients as staff members, first of all. They do not refer to the patients as patients. They refer to them as students, which to me removes the responsibility that's so important in an addict. They're not addicts, they're students. And the first step to getting help is admitting that you have a problem. And if you don't have to admit that, then how are you going to get help? And they don't require that. They're also a cold turkey treatment facility, no matter what. They treat all of their they treat all of their students the same way, whether you're addicted to marijuana or you're addicted to crystal meth.
Oh my God, you can't do that.
Yeah, they do. And I just, if I could use this as an opportunity to get any word out, any devastated, struggling family right now, if your loved one is addicted to any drug, please do not use Narcanon facilities, because they will find themselves yelling at ashtrays and not getting the help they need. One of the courses, that these students take is called Command Intention, and they put an ashtray on a chair and they tell it, stand up, and they will lift the ashtray up into the air and then sit it back down and thank it. Now, I'm not a psychiatrist and I have never studied addiction, although I do know some former addicts, and I just don't see how that could ever possibly help stop an addict. But that is part of the training that goes
It's
on
it's not
for
just
these students.
it's not just Narcan either. There's a large amount of rehab facilities. The idea of rehab is to get you off drugs. Well,
Mhm.
they don't teach you to cure the problem of why a person is using drugs in the first place. Usually it's some
Right.
infliction. So they teach you to get off crystal meth. That's what they're there for. Well,
Mhm.
the person goes home to a house that's burned down, which is the reason why they went to crystal meth. And next thing you know, they're like, well, fuck it, I'm going to do heroin. And then they do heroin. And then they're back
Yeah.
in the rehab facility. It's a money pumping scheme. I mean, the
Yeah.
people like Dr. Drew that I used to be a fan of until I found out he made the show Celebrity Rehab, which was
Yeah.
preying off the pain of somebody else's misfortune. And I don't like that at all
Exactly.
either.
No, I don't either. no. Um, in addition to
Is that a horse or
Narcanon,
a dog?
I'm sorry, that's my dog, Sasha.
I heard a
But she's
gallop.
a German Shepherd. Sasha, shh, stop drinking. In addition to Narcanon, um, Scientology also has a front group called the CCHR, which is the Citizens Commission on Human Rights. And their sole purpose is the complete destruction of psychiatry. They, if you go to their website
I've
and you
heard Tom
look,
Cruise talk about this.
yeah, and when he took off after Brooke Shields for her taking a medication for her postpartum depression, and he had made, I believe he made the comment at the time that he could have helped her without drugs and all of this stuff. I mean, like I said, and yet he's still working in Hollywood. But they, if you go to their website and you will see, they do not believe mental illness exists. They say that it doesn't. They say that mental illness is just a construct of big pharma, that like even in children, ADHD is not a mental illness, or it is not a medical diagnosis. It is a behavioral issue. They say that autism, no. Mental illness, because it does not have it, they say, because it does not have any biodiagnostic tools, for example, blood tests, x-rays, whatever, mental illness is not real. Depression is not real. And as a matter of fact, people with depression, I know that I was told by a former Scientologist that they have heard Scientologists say they don't understand why a thetan, the soul, whatever, would choose a degraded body, and that they would, which would, someone that suffers from depression, and it would be
It's me.
better if that, well, and I have anxiety, but that doesn't exist either.
I have ADHD and severe depression, so I'm
Well,
just.
according to Scientology, no, you don't.
I invite them on the show, Dad. Tell me why I don't.
um, the comment was that they don't understand why a thetan would choose such a degraded body, and it would be better for that thetan to drop that body and start over again.
Had those thoughts a couple of times, but don't do it though. I don't think you need a
No.
pill to be able to fix your issues. My ADHD, I work with it, so I crank out a lot of content, and that's how
Mhm.
you funnel it into something. Depression, that tunnel, sometimes it never ends. I'm talking because I'm not in it right now, but
Right,
there are
right,
times I have my moments where I don't want to go out into the world and I don't want to do things. I think it's just about elevating your perspective on what it is. So I don't
right,
necessarily think you need to take a pill for it, but
right.
I also look at some people need assistance and help in this situation, and saying that doesn't exist is now you're devaluing. It's like when
That's the
Australia,
problem.
yeah, Australia made shark attacks, instead of calling them shark attacks, they're called close encounters, or they're not called predators anymore. They're now
Mhm.
aggressive behavior. I don't know, something like that. I'm like, now you're devaluing anybody who has a shark attack story where they might have lost a limb. Like you don't
Right.
understand
It's
what they do.
it's a form of, as far as I'm concerned, it's a form of intolerance. It really is, because, and it's we people who do suffer from depression and anxiety and bipolar and other mental illnesses, it is a huge struggle, and it's a real problem. And for Scientology to say that mental illness or insanity, for them it's the same thing, that is one of the things that they want to clear from the planet, and it's in the same category for them as war and crime. That is just to reinforce the stigma that we all are trying so hard to overcome. And I think that it, like I said, all of these are just by themselves, they're an unhealthy, toxic thought process. But everything, all of the examples that I've tried to give, the Narcanon and the false accusations of domestic violence and all of those things, it all comes back to, when you take that as a whole, Scientology is not a religion. They are not a charitable organization. They are not a benign humanitarian group. They do not care about the planet. They don't care about anything but the bottom line. Scientology is, in fact, a conglomerate, a tax-free conglomerate. That's the bottom line. And we need to have their tax exemption revoked, and they need to be held accountable for these abuses and this psychological terrorism that they perpetrate on their members and their former members, and even those who have never been in Scientology. They refer to any non-Scientologist as a wog, and it's a derogatory term for them because they believe they're superior. They're not a church, they're not a religion, and they need to be taken seriously. And the most important thing of all is for never-ends, which is what I call those of us who have never been in the cult. We need to take a stand, and we need to constantly write to our representatives. We need to constantly write to the IRS, and we need to have an investigation opened into the tax exemption, and it needs to be revoked for the sake of the people that are run over, that are bulldozed over by David Miscavige and that cult.
Never expect a wolf in sheep's clothing.
Exactly.
Stephanie, I appreciate you for doing my podcast. Coming
Thank you
on.
for having me. I appreciate it.
I'm gonna need a nap. That's some draining stuff. It was great talking to you, seriously. But when you learn all this type of stuff, I wonder how so many people can keep this in their heads and not just shout it from the rooftops. I know you guys are trying on social media and things of that sort, but every person I meet, I'd be like, "Do you even?" And I just would lose it. And I think that's what they necessarily want too, because then you're seen as a crazy person, so anything you says doesn't get taken serious. It's a mind game. I'm like, dude, who's playing chess here?
That's right. That's right. But I'm willing to play. I'm willing to play, and I'm going to shout it every chance I get. And I appreciate very much you giving me the opportunity to shout once again.
I'm sure this will be one of many times we'll have a chat. I'd love to get you back on, but
I would love to come back. I really would. Thank you.
Where can people find your links, your blog, and everything to be able to look up some information for themselves as well?
My blog is on WordPress. If you just put in WordPress, Confront and Shatter, it'll come up, and it's there for anybody who wants to see. And I'm on Twitter at Ultio at Veritas. It's the at symbol and then ULTIOETVERITAS, which is vengeance and truth.
Well, I'll make sure I link everything in the description. And I appreciate you for coming on to the podcast. And thank you, everybody, for listening to this episode.